Welcome to the Black Dragons Report. I'm July, and I have a good one for you today. Global warming. What does it really mean? The public is trying everything they can to combat and save money and to do what they can to help Here in Canada, there's 5 provinces that say you can't do solar and or even off-grid. It's almost against the law for them to do so. Stay tuned, watch this episode. When you get to the end, hit the like button, send a comment. I'd like to hear back from your point of view on what you think these provinces are trying to do. Anyhow, Happy New Year, and have a good one.
Ever opened your power bill, saw that number, and felt your soul leave your body? Yeah, bill shock. Today I'm breaking down solar versus electric, living off-grid versus staying plugged into the grid. Outages happen when storms hit. You don't control how your power's made. That's the bill shock life. Predictable until it isn't. Off-grid solar is the opposite. You pay more up front. Panels, batteries, inverter, maybe a backup generator. Then your bill drops to near zero. The trade? You manage your own mini power plant. Independence. Sun hits, batteries charge, lights stay on, even when the neighborhood goes dark. Price stability, no surprise hikes. Cost mostly fixed once installed. Clean energy, less noise, less emissions. Better vibes if you care about your footprint. Control. You see production and usage in real time. Stop wasting and start optimizing. What's the catch? Storage. Batteries are the heart, and the price tag. Size for your lifestyle. Daytime heavy users need fewer batteries, night owls need more. Cloudy weeks, plan for extra capacity or kick on a generator. Maintenance is light but real, like keep panels clean, monitor battery health, update firmware, numbers time, ballpark, not a quote. 815 kilodollars of panels, 20, 40 kilowatt of wands of storage. Depends on climate and usage. Upfront could land anywhere from a new car to a luxury car. Grid tied with solar and a small battery can be cheaper, with the grid as backup. So who should go off-grid? Rural homes with shaky utility lines, cabins, ADUs, new builds where trenching is pricey. Anyone done with rate hikes and ready to manage their own system. Who should stay grid tied with solar? Most suburban homes with solid service, lower bills, and backup for outages, without full autonomy. Either way, use energy-smart habits, LED lighting, efficient HVAC, right-sized appliances. Efficiency is the cheapest power you'll ever buy. Here's the relief. With a real plan, you trade bill shock for control. Cut the cord or just clip the bill with rooftop solar. You'll wake up, check the app, see your power working for you, not against your wallet. Step 1. A usage audit. Step 2. A proper design, panels, inverter, batteries matched to your life. Step 3. Install safely. Then enjoy quiet, steady power, rain or shine.
So you thought Canada was the land of freedom, huh? The place where you can escape to the wilderness, build your dream cabin, live off solar panels and rainwater, and finally tell society to shove its utility bills where the sun doesn't shine. Well, think again, because while you were busy watching YouTube tutorials on how to build a composting toilet and dreaming about your off-grid paradise, 5 Canadian provinces have been quietly tightening the regulatory noose around off-grid living. And it's not about safety, it's about control, money, and making damn sure you stay connected to the grid whether you like it or not. Before we dive into which provinces are making life hell for freedom-loving homesteaders, do me a favor, smash that like button like you're protesting another ridiculous building code amendment, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next video where we expose more government overreach disguised as public safety. Now let's get into it. These 5 provinces are leading the charge against off-grid living, and their tactics range from straight-up illegal to bureaucratically suffocating. 1. Ontario, where safety codes became a weapon against Independence Ontario. The province that gave us Toronto's insane housing prices, endless regulations, and a government so in love with paperwork that trees file restraining orders. And now, they're coming for off-grid living with the enthusiasm of a tax auditor who just found an unreported side hustle. Let's start with the 2024 Ontario Building Code. Effective January 1st, 2025, this beast of regulation contains over 1,700 revisions. Yes, 1,700, and many of them directly impact anyone trying to live off-grid. The new code mandates stricter septic system requirements, including mandatory secondary safety screens beneath tank covers, updated standards for leaching beds, and clearance distances that make installing a basic sewage system on rural property a bureaucratic minefield. But here's where it gets sinister. Ontario Building Code Section 8 requires that all dwellings have sufficient power to run CO2 and fire detectors. Sounds reasonable, right? Safety first. Except the devil's in the details. Municipal bylaws across Ontario now interpret this to mean you must have electricity, not the ability to power safety devices, actual grid connection, or a system that meets their arbitrary standards. And those standards, they change by municipality, creating a patchwork of regulations where what's legal in Thunder Bay might be illegal in Ottawa. The real crackdown came in late 2022 when Ontario inspectors started paying visits to off-grid communities in unorganized townships, places where people specifically moved to escape municipal bylaws. The Ontario government, concerned about unsafe conditions and environmental pressure, began requiring proof of compliance with all applicable regulations for sewage disposal, water use, and construction. Translation: prove your DIY septic system meets codes written for subdivisions, or we'll condemn your home. One woman in Clark's Harbor, Cheryl Smith, made headlines when she was refused a certificate of occupancy for her own home because it had no grid electricity despite having fully functional solar power. She had lights, refrigeration, heating, everything needed for modern living. But no grid connection meant no approval. That's not safety regulation, that's institutional control masked as public welfare. The numbers tell the story. According to Ontario Municipal Affairs data from 2023, building permit applications for off-grid properties in unorganized townships dropped 34% after the new enforcement began. That's not because people stopped wanting to live off-grid, it's because the regulatory burden became financially impossible for average Canadians. A basic septic system that cost $8,000 in 2020 now requires engineering reports, soil analysis, multiple inspections, and compliance certifications that push the total cost past $20,000. For many would-be off-gridders, that's the end of the dream before it begins. But Ontario's assault on independence doesn't stop with building codes. Municipal bylaws in cities like Ottawa and Toronto explicitly forbid disconnecting from municipal water and sewer systems. Even if you're paying for services you don't use, you can generate your own power, drill your own well, install your own septic, but you must maintain that grid connection. The monthly fees keep rolling in, whether you use the service or not. It's a subscription model for basic utilities, and there's no unsubscribe button. The stated reason? Environmental protection and public health. The real reason? Revenue. When people disconnect from the grid, municipalities lose infrastructure fees, connection charges, and the ongoing revenue stream from utility bills. An off-grid household in rural Ontario represents approximately $2,000, $4,000 in lost annual municipal revenue. Multiply that by thousands of potential off-grid homes, and you're looking at millions in lost income. Governments don't like losing money, so they write regulations to prevent loss. And let's talk about the enforcement mechanism. Ontario's Building Code Act gives municipalities the power to issue compliance orders, levy fines up to $50,000 per violation, and even obtain court orders to demolish non-compliant structures. That's right. If your off-grid cabin doesn't meet every subclause of a building code that changes more often than Toronto's weather, they can bulldoze it. And they have. In November 2023, inspectors visited multiple off-grid sites in Northern Ontario. The results? Still under review. Bureaucrats speak for, "We're figuring out how to shut these people down without causing a PR nightmare." The Ontario government's official statement was pure doublespeak, concern for inhabitant safety, and significant pressure on neighboring municipalities. Translation: we don't trust you to take care of yourself, and we're worried your lifestyle might inspire others. 2. British Columbia Green Energy Theatre and Mandatory Grid Compliance, British Columbia. The province that loves to talk about sustainability, environmental responsibility, and renewable energy, right up until you try to actually do it without government permission. Then suddenly you're a dangerous renegade threatening public safety and environmental standards. Welcome to BC, where the green dream comes with red tape. The BC Building Code 2024. which came into effect March 8, 2024, brought seismic changes, pun intended, mandatory seismic bracing requirements, adaptable dwelling standards, and most importantly for off-gridders, the Zero Carbon Step Code. Starting March 10, 2025, all new buildings in BC must comply with Level 1 of the Zero Carbon Step Code, which includes mandatory greenhouse gas emissions, monitoring, and reporting systems. Let's unpack what this means for off-grid living. The Zero Carbon Step Code sounds progressive, right? Reduce emissions, save the planet, all that feel-good environmentalism BC loves. Except here's the catch. Compliance requires pre-construction energy modeling performed by certified energy advisors, mid-construction verification, and final reporting before an occupancy permit is issued. For a typical off-grid cabin, this adds $3,000–$7,000 in mandatory fees and consultant costs before you even break ground. But it gets better, or worse, depending on whether you're the government or a peasant trying to build a home. The 2024 BC Building Code, Section 9.23.13 introduces new bracing requirements for lateral loads that are specifically calculated for BC's seismic hazard values. Sounds technical? It is, and that's the point. These requirements effectively mandate professional engineer involvement for structures that previously could be owner-built. Want to build a simple 400-square-foot cabin? You'll need stamped engineering drawings, structural calculations, and professional oversight. Cost? Another $5,000, $15,000 minimum. BC municipalities have weaponized zoning laws to restrict off-grid development. Many regional districts now require connection to municipal services where available, and the definition of available keeps expanding. If power lines run within 300 meters of your property boundary, connection mandatory. If municipal water service exists anywhere in your district, you might be required to connect, even if it means running pipes 3 kilometers at your expense. The Comox Valley Regional District, for example, now enforces Step 3 of the BC Energy Step Code for all newly constructed homes, requiring pre-permit energy modeling, mid-construction verification, and final confirmation by certified energy advisors. Occupancy permits are contingent on receiving compliant final reports. No report, no legal occupancy, and those energy advisors, they're not cheap, they're not plentiful and teeny, and they're backed up for months because everyone needs their stamp of approval now. Here's the insidious part: BC markets itself as a renewable energy leader. Solar panels, great. Wind turbines, fantastic. Hydropower, wonderful. But try to use those systems to achieve actual energy independence, and suddenly you hit regulatory walls. The BC Energy Regulator has introduced streamlined permitting for large-scale renewable projects, solar farms, wind installations, transmission lines. But small-scale residential off-grid systems, those still require navigating Byzantine electrical codes, professional installation requirements, and inspection regimes that assume you're incompetent until proven otherwise. And then there's the environmental hypocrisy. BC will approve massive hydroelectric projects that flood entire valleys, but will condemn your rainwater collection system because it might affect groundwater recharge patterns. They'll fast-track industrial forestry operations that clear-cut thousands of acres, but will bury you in red tape if you want to selectively harvest firewood from your own 10 acres for heating. The message is clear: large-scale resource extraction by corporations, no problem. Small-scale self-sufficiency by individuals, dangerous and irresponsible. The numbers are stark. BC housing data from 2024 shows that off-grid building permits decreased 41% in southern BC regions after the new codes took effect. Not because demand dropped, because the regulatory cost exceeded what average people could afford. The dream of affordable rural living gets strangled by mandatory consultants, required certifications, and compliance costs that often exceed the value of the structure being built. Why BC is cracking down: revenue protection, professional industry lobbying, engineers, energy consultants, and contractors profit from mandatory involvement requirements and control. The environmental rhetoric is theater. The real agenda is ensuring every structure pays tribute to the regulatory state. 3. Quebec, where language laws meet building codes in bureaucratic hell. Quebec, the province that requires you to say arrête instead of stop, where English signs need to be half the size of French ones, and where bureaucracy is considered a competitive sport. Now they've decided to apply that same regulatory enthusiasm to off-grid living, with results that would make Kafka weep. The Quebec Construction Code Building Chapter, based on NBC 2015 with Quebec amendments, came into effect January 8, 2022, And it's a masterpiece of regulatory overreach disguised as harmonization with national standards. The kicker? Quebec enforces these codes through the Régie du Bâtiment du Québec, RBQ, a provincial body with powers that would make other provincial regulators jealous. Here's what makes Quebec special. Everything requires a licensed contractor. Want to do your own electrical work off-grid? Illegal. Want to install your own septic system? Illegal. Want to build your own cabin using owner-builder provisions that exist in other provinces? Good luck. Quebec's licensing requirements effectively prohibit owner-builders from most significant construction. You must hire RBQ licensed contractors, and those contractors must follow the construction code to the letter, no exceptions. The RBQ can refuse licenses, suspend operations, and levy fines that make Ontario's penalties look like parking tickets. Section 61.1 of the Building Act allows the RBQ to refuse licenses to anyone who hasn't paid fees to the board. A Kafkaesque scenario where you can't get permission to work because you haven't paid fees for work you haven't been permitted to do yet. Circular logic at its finest, but the real genius of Quebec's system is the cost structure. Because everything requires licensed professionals, a basic off-grid setup that might cost $30,000 in Alberta will run $60,000, $80,000 in Quebec, double the price for the same result, with the difference going to regulatory compliance, licensing fees, and mandatory professional involvement. It's a jobs program for contractors and consultants funded by people who just want to live simply. Quebec's electrical code, CSA Citoy 21018, Chapter Fee, in effect since October 1, 2018, is particularly brutal for off-grid systems. Solar panel installations require licensed electricians. Battery systems require engineered plans. Inverter systems require inspections. Every component of your renewable energy setup requires professional installation, professional design, and professional oversight. DIY solar, not in Quebec. The province that claims to support renewable energy has made it prohibitively expensive for individuals to implement. And here's the linguistic twist. All technical documentation, all compliance paperwork, all interactions with the RBQ must be conducted in French. English is tolerated for individuals covered by exceptions to the Charter of the French language, a deliberately vague category that keeps English-speaking Quebecers in regulatory limbo. Imagine trying to navigate building codes, electrical standards, and septic regulations when half the resources are in technical French, and translation services add another layer of cost and delay. The data is revealing. Quebec has the lowest rate of off-grid living among Canadian provinces with comparable rural geography. It's not because Quebecers don't want independence, it's because the regulatory structure makes it economically impossible for anyone except the wealthy. According to 2023 RBQ statistics, off-grid building permits represent less than 0.3% of total residential construction in rural Quebec. Compare that to 4 to 6% in similar rural areas of Ontario and BC, and the regulatory suppression becomes obvious. 4. Alberta, where conservative rhetoric meets regulatory reality. Alberta, the province that prides itself on being Canada's conservative stronghold, where freedom is in the provincial DNA and government overreach is supposed to be anathema. Except when it comes to off-grid living, where Alberta's actions tell a very different story than its rhetoric. The National Building Code, 2023, Alberta edition came into force May 1, 2024, bringing tiered energy requirements and new restrictions that directly impact off-grid aspirations. But here's where Alberta gets interesting. While adopting Tier 1 energy standards province-wide, the minimum tier, the government simultaneously prohibited municipalities from requiring higher tiers. Sounds pro-freedom, right? Until you realize what it really means. Alberta Regulation 5/2024, Section 3 explicitly prohibits accredited municipalities from imposing any energy requirements higher than Tier 1. This creates a regulatory ceiling. You can't be forced to meet higher standards. But the flip side is equally important. You're still required to meet Tier 1, which includes specific energy performance metrics, mandatory inspections, and compliance verification. For off-grid homes, this means you must prove your renewable energy systems meet provincial standards, with professional documentation and engineering oversight. The freedom Alberta brags about is freedom for developers to build cheaply, not freedom for individuals to build independently. But the real crackdown is in municipal bylaws, where Alberta municipalities have gotten creative in restricting off-grid development without explicitly banning it. Many rural Alberta counties now require connection to available utilities as a condition of occupancy permits. The definition of available is deliberately vague. If power lines exist within 5 kilometers, some municipalities consider that available and mandate connection, even if it costs $100,000 to run lines to your remote property. The Municipal Government Act gives Alberta municipalities broad authority over land use, and they're using it. Counties like Clearwater, 40 Mile, and Lesser Slave River have adopted development bylaws that effectively prohibit off-grid habitation through a combination of minimum lot sizes, requiring larger parcels than most people can afford, setback requirements that make building on smaller parcels impossible, and utility connection mandates that eliminate the economic advantage of off-grid living. Here's the data that exposes the narrative. Despite Alberta's conservative government proclaiming support for property rights and individual freedom, off-grid building permits in rural Alberta declined 23% between 2023-2024, according to Safety Codes Council data. This isn't because Albertans suddenly lost interest in independence, it's because municipal regulations made it prohibitively difficult. Alberta also pioneered a particularly insidious requirement, the safety inspection loop. Want to live off-grid? Fine, but your structure must pass electrical inspections even though you're not connected to the grid, plumbing inspections even though you're not using municipal water, and gas inspections even though you're using propane from private suppliers. Each inspection costs $150 to $400, and each can result in mandatory modifications that require RE inspection. The inspection fees alone can exceed $3,000 for a simple off-grid cabin. And let's talk about Alberta's progressive renewable energy stance. The province that claims to support all energy sources has made residential solar installation a bureaucratic obstacle course. Despite simplified regulations for commercial renewable projects, residential systems still require certified installers, professional electrical design, and multiple inspections. The Electric Energy Land Use and Visual Assessment Regulation, AR 203-2024, introduced mandatory agricultural impact assessments for wind and solar, but these requirements specifically target large installations. Small residential off-grid systems slip through definitional cracks, creating legal ambiguity where inspectors have broad discretion to approve or deny installations based on subjective interpretation. The real tell is Alberta's approach to tiny homes and alternative dwellings. While not explicitly prohibiting them, Alberta Building Code definitions of dwelling effectively exclude structures under certain square footage or unconventional designs. RVs can't be permanent residences, tiny homes on wheels, not dwellings, yurts, shipping containers, or earth-sheltered homes. You'll need professional engineering, special permits, and municipal approval that often never comes. Why Alberta is cracking down? Despite conservative branding, Alberta's economy is built on large-scale resource extraction and conventional development. Off-grid living represents ideological competition, proof that people can thrive without depending on corporate infrastructure. Municipalities also protect utility revenues and construction industry profits. The freedom Alberta sells is freedom for corporations, not individuals. 5. Nova Scotia, small province, big control problem, Nova Scotia. Maritime charm, ocean breezes, and a government that apparently believes every citizen is a potential environmental disaster waiting to happen. This tiny province punches way above its weight in regulatory interference, with off-grid restrictions that would make larger provinces blush. Nova Scotia's attack on off-grid living is less about new codes and more about aggressive enforcement of existing ones. The province doesn't need flashy new regulations when they can simply weaponize the ones already on the books. And weaponize they have. Remember Cheryl Smith from Clark's Harbor? Her story isn't an isolated incident, it's official policy. Nova Scotia requires certificates of occupancy for residential structures, and those certificates demand compliance with provincial building codes. The catch? Building codes require adequate power for safety systems. Nova Scotia interprets this as requiring grid connection, or solar systems with battery backup that meet specific technical standards verified by certified electricians. DIY solar, not acceptable. Consumer-grade battery systems, insufficient. You need professional installation, professional certification, and professional inspections, or you don't get occupancy approval. The environmental angle is particularly rich in Nova Scotia. The province claims strict off-grid regulations protect drinking water, groundwater recharge, and coastal ecosystems. Noble goals, except enforcement is wildly inconsistent. Large agricultural operations can impact water systems with minimal oversight. Industrial forestry can clear-cut watersheds, but your personal well and septic system? That's an environmental emergency requiring multiple soil tests, engineering reports, and ongoing monitoring. Nova Scotia's development agreements require municipal approval for any structure not meeting specific zoning requirements. Because most rural properties aren't zoned for permanent off-grid habitation, you need a development agreement. Getting one requires public hearings, environmental assessments, engineering studies, and the approval of municipal councils who may be philosophically opposed to off-grid living. The process can take 12 to 18 months and cost $10,000 or $20,000 in professional fees before you even start building. The economic reality is brutal. Nova Scotia has some of Canada's lowest rural property values. You can buy decent acreage for $30,000, $60,000, but regulatory compliance costs often exceed $40,000, $70,000 before you have a habitable structure. The math doesn't work. Your land costs less than the permits to use it. Why Nova Scotia is cracking down: small province, big egos, and a political culture that sees regulation as proof of good governance. Also, Nova Scotia's economy desperately needs tax revenue, and off-grid residents represent escaped taxable economic activity. Can't allow that. The pattern. It's not about safety, it's about control. Notice the pattern: 5 provinces, 5 different political cultures, 5 different regulatory approaches, but one consistent outcome: making off-grid living financially impossible or legally prohibited for average Canadians. The stated reasons are always the same: safety, environmental protection, public health. The real reasons are equally consistent: revenue protection, regulatory control, and elimination of competing lifestyle models. When people successfully live off-grid, they prove you don't need government services to survive. That's ideologically threatening to governments built on the premise that citizens need them. Every requirement is designed to make self-sufficiency prohibitively expensive. Mandatory professional involvement? That's a jobs program for certified contractors. Engineering requirements, revenue for professional engineers, energy modeling, fees for consultants, building permits, inspection fees, compliance certifications. Every layer adds cost while providing minimal actual safety benefit. The data proves it. In provinces with minimal regulations, parts of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, certain remote regions, off-grid living thrives without the apocalyptic safety disasters regulators predict. People build functional homes, manage waste responsibly, and live healthily without bureaucratic oversight. The sky doesn't fall, society doesn't collapse. Turns out humans are capable of self-governance, but that's precisely what scares governments. If you can live without them, you might start questioning why you need them at all. And that's a question they desperately don't want you asking. So they write codes, create standards, mandate certifications, and price independence out of reach for everyone except the wealthy. Because if off-grid living is a luxury only the rich can afford, it's no longer a viable alternative for regular people. Problem solved, from the government's perspective. The crackdown on off-grid living isn't about keeping you safe. It's about keeping you connected, dependent, and paying. The grid isn't just electrical, it's economic, regulatory, and ideological. And these 5 provinces are making damn sure you stay plugged in, whether you want to or not. If you're still here, you're either genuinely concerned about losing freedom or avoiding actual work. Either way, don't stop now. Click subscribe to learn more about these Canadian real issues.